just a few sentences about chapters 8, 9 and 10. These chapters, as I'm sure you've discovered, do fit together. It can not always be easy to see how. But what we have here, it seems, is people who are arguing for the right to continue to go into the temple and partake of the meals that were there. I've mentioned that's part of their culture, and if they were it's part of their trade, maybe a trade guild, and they were wanting to do this. Celebrations, invited to family events, all sorts of things. And they knew it was okay because they knew that idols weren't anything because there's only one God. So you can see their argument. There's only one God, that idols aren't anything, it doesn't matter. And Paul agrees with them, but he said the problem is what can happen is you go into this temple, you know it's okay, but the people come along and they see you, and it really causes them to stumble because they do not have the same knowledge as you. And as he argues this through, he says, verse 13, if food is a cause of their falling, I will never eat meat, so that I may not cause one of them to fall. Now, remember there's no chapter division. He goes straight on to then talk about how even though he's an apostle and has rights, he's given up those rights. And the whole chapter 9 is about the rights he's given up. And the reason is at the end of towards the end of the chapter, is that he wants to serve people. In everything he does, he wants to serve people. And connected to this, of course, is the thinking that if you work with your hands, it's demeaning. And so we've got this couple of things going on here. I have the right to money, but I choose not to actually use that right. And but rather, what I do is I've given up that right so I can reach people for Christ. And as part of that is self-control, the need for self-control. And that's how he ends the chapter and begins chapter 10. How Israel become an example of people who lack that self-control. So you think you have a right to go in the temple and partake of food, okay, but it's not all about you. It's about other people. And I am an example of the way I become all things to all men, a Jew to Jews, a Gentile to Gentiles. I'll do whatever it takes to reach them with the gospel. And I do it all for the sake of the gospel. We have a race to run that requires discipline. It requires commitment. Look at Israel. They were in the desert. They didn't exercise that, and then they all crashed to the ground. You know, it was bad for them. And then he picks it up again in verse 14 of chapter 10. Therefore, dear friends, flee from the worship of idols. Now, he takes that argument that idols are nothing and it doesn't matter because we know that there's no gods but one. And he picks up that argument and he says, actually, that's not quite right. Judge for yourself. You know, when we take the bread and the wine, don't we share in the body of Christ? And the answer to that, of course, is yes. When Israel, when they offered their sacrifices, they were becoming partakers with the altar when they ate part of that sacrifice. In other words, they were connected to it. Verse 19, what do I imply then? That the food sacrificed to idols is anything, or that idols is anything? No, I imply that what pagan sacrifice, they sacrifice to demons and not to God, and I don't want you to be a partner of demons. So it's almost like he eventually gets to the point he wants to make, is when you're in there partaking in these idol temples, what's happening is you're partnering with demons. So don't do it. But if food is in the marketplace and being sold, and that would be the custom, if somebody took an animal for a sacrifice in the temple, there's far too much meat for them to consume, even with a big party. You know, it would end up being sold in the butcher shop in the marketplace. Don't raise any question, unless you're going to hurt someone else because they have questions. So all the time is about serving other people and not about us. And that's really how he argues that through. And he finishes up, doesn't he? Be imitators of me as I am of Christ. The way I live my life is for others and for the sake of the gospel, and that the gospel won't be hindered. So if anything you do is going to hinder the gospel, then change.